Welcome to the Experience Strategy Podcast. I'm Aransas, and I'm here with Joe Pine, author of The Transformation Economy and many other best-selling books, as well as Dave Norton, an experience futurist. Today, we're going to talk about the future. As collectively, Dave, Joe, and I have spent too many decades in research, and the Wall Street Journal seems like it's thinking a lot about how AI is going to disrupt the market research industry. So they've published a couple of recent articles on this. The first asks the question, can AI replace humans for market research? Talking about an AI startup called Simile, which is focused on agentic twins modeled on real people to provide answers for polling and market research needs. Another recent article looks at the team behind Aura, who are, well, they've all been alive less time than the three of us have been in market research. Literally the youngest.
Barely older than your oldest daughter, Aransas.
Yeah, exactly. My high school age student is as young as these founders. But they've created a company called Aura, and they're attracting some big brands like McDonald's and EY by betting that AI bots can predict human behavior better than humans can. So we want to talk about both of these articles. As always, Dave will include links to those articles in the show notes. And we're excited to continue this conversation with you over on the Experience Strategy Substack. And if you've ever watched one of our episodes on YouTube, this might be one to just turn off the audio on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you are and head over to YouTube so that you can watch Joe casually smoke a cigar while we have this conversation. Because at this moment, he is in his conference room / cigar room. These are
cigar
all
lounge. Conference room / cigar lounge.
Cigar lounge.
Right.
Someday let's do an episode talking about the conversation between you and your wife when you proposed this. My husband would probably like to hear.
Yeah, well, there was no other possibility. There was no decision. It was a fait accompli.
Wow. Okay, that's a whole other conversation.
Right. I'm taking advantage of it here because my computer's on the fritz. I'm not in my normal setup, and I'm actually borrowing my wife's computer, hoping mine will come back from the dead. But I've already got a new one on order, so I'm in my conference room / cigar lounge. I said, all right, well, let's do this podcast just a little different.
It's like, remember in the 80s how when a baby was born, they would hand out cigars?
Was that the 80s?
That was the 1880s.
Yeah.
That was the 1980s in Texas.
Well, I know.
Really?
I know. I did as well when my daughters were born. I did, but it's not something that began in the 80s. That's been around
fair.
hundreds.
That's when it began for me.
Okay.
But it seems appropriate since you just launched your book. Before we talk about this, about AI twins, let's just talk for a second about how things have been going with the book tour.
Terrific. We had the book officially published on February 3rd, did a launch event in Minneapolis we called Ascend, where I went through that. Gave away and simultaneously announcing the Transformation Toolkit, which is a very high cost, high value offering. I wrote almost 19,000 new words, basically almost all in December to get this out in time. So anybody wants to operationalize what's in the book, there's one tool for every chapter plus another tool on charging for outcomes, which is both the first and the last chapter. Just been written up in the Financial Times and book reviews and many other places. One Bowling Green daily newspaper, whatever it is, had like the best review that this guy got me. I put on like, this guy gets me. He knows what I'm trying to do with this book. And just yesterday, Toronto Globe and Mail did a review of it as well. So, and I just got back from South by Southwest. I got back late last night, 6 hours late, and so I'm working on fumes here without a good computer. But I spoke on Sunday to 150 folks or so, and it was very well received, and a lot of Brazilians there for some reason. But yeah, it's going very well.
Amazing. Congrats. It's been really
You do.
fun to watch it all. So let's just talk first blush. Dave, when you read these articles, what was your first thought?
That's what I want to know too. Is I want to know what Dave thought when he read this article that could put consumer insights out of business, right?
Yep.
Yeah, right, right. So my first response was a little bit of panic because Stone Mantle does research and has for a long, long time, right? That's been kind of a core offering for us, and then I was like dubious. Is this really going to be good? And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this might actually put even more of a premium on a certain type of consumer research, while stuff that is generic research maybe won't, maybe it'll work for. And then, like, kind of where I'm at today is a very different place, which is, yeah, there needs to be a research simulator.
Yes, yes.
There are airplane simulators. They serve a really good purpose. There are all kinds of different simulators out there. As long as we can delineate between, there's a difference between simulation and real, then I think we've got some place to go. But that's where I'm kind of at right now. And we could talk about that if you want. There's an additional element to the simulation that I think we need to talk about, which is, this idea of AI twins that, you basically give the consumer a long list of questions, and based on that set of questions, you build a persona. That persona then is able to respond. They're saying with an accuracy level of 0.5% difference between the two. I think there's something really off in the way that they're thinking about how humans make decisions, but doesn't mean that there's not a good simulator that could be used to help you think. It's just that it's not actually how people behave, and we can talk about that as well. So those different responses the longer I thought about it.
Yeah, I had much the same reaction, almost in the same sequence of it, of like first like wow, and then is that really possible? And I just think that there's absolutely going to be value. It sort of reminds me of the old Sim City, right? My girls, born in the 80s, Aransas, where I gave out cigars, were Sim City enthusiasts, and you had all these little people walking around and that sort of thing. And they had a tiny bit of...
My kids born in the early aughts in mid aughts, are Sim fanatics.
Right.
So.
Oh, great. There you go. That's a long-lasting game.
It really is.
And there was at least a little bit of agency in what they could do. So this is a sophisticated version of that, where they do, in fact, and the one article with the teenage founders didn't really say how. The other article talked about, but how they were simulated. It wasn't like they had asked people a bunch of questions, but they said their accuracy was not 0.5% off. They said they were better than talking to consumers, and I just don't know. One is, how do you know?
Yeah, like I think their model was. They used predictive algorithms for like marketplace predictions and like Kalshi type platforms to try to predict outcomes, which is a different model than the group in San Francisco is using, where they're basically just saying this person, when they answer a question, the answer that the persona gives is very similar. So they're actually two very different models. And that's interesting.
Yeah. Two different ways to approach the same problem. Yeah, I'll tell you that the first thing I thought about was Shelley's Alice. So her sort of origin story is that she is the mother of digital research, because she was the first one to say, like, oh, this internet could be used for research. It isn't all just
The information
focus
highway, super highway.
exactly, exactly. And I think it took a lot for her to convince people that digital tools could be used to conduct research more cost effectively and just as meaningfully. And I just think, faster, cheaper, better is always what everybody's trying to go for. And you hear that in these stories.
Everybody that wants to commoditize themselves.
Correct.
wants to go for it.
Well, and I think that brings up Dave's point about to what end. The other thing I think is interesting is we're starting to make a distinction here between trend analysis. So predicting trends, I think, is actually something that makes a lot of sense for these digital twins, right? Like those are cyclical in nature. They have a tendency to follow a pretty predictable curve. And so the fact that Dave Berwick, my former boss, and the crew over at Spindrift were able to say, fruit flavored tea. I think that makes a ton of sense, right? Because what these AI models are looking at is both historical data, purchasing data, and sort of like common factors happening in culture right now. What I think is different, and I think that is much more interesting, is the contextual type of data that we talk so much about.
Bingo.
What situation is this person in?
What mode are they didn't ask anything about mode.
No.
Man, you guys been listening to me way too much, but yeah, that's exactly it. Our basic notion is that human behavior changes depending upon the context in which they find themselves in. So that's not being addressed by AI twins. Now, could it be add a filter that would allow for contextual data to be applied? Possibly.
But you'd have to get all those questions answered by them when they're in the mode. Mm-hmm. I mean, well, you tell me, is it enough to think about when I'm in the mode? Will I give the right answers versus when I'm actually in the mode?
Well, I think it's about other people who've been in your mode.
Yeah.
Right. So what I need to understand, right, if I'm going to create AI twins, is I need situational twins, contextual twins that are nuanced enough to align with all of these other sort of demographic data points and needs, goals, all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a kind of a classic type thing. They're thinking in terms of preferences. Mm-hmm. They're embedding into it like permanent attitudes. So this is the way soccer mom always responds.
Right.
Like, what is that? Like that doesn't work very well. So all of the things that we have been saying you should not be doing anymore, they're going to embed into the data. And sure, it will, to the extent that demographic data or psychographic data is predictive of certain types of trends, it will help them. Mm-hmm. And maybe, and I don't know what you think about this, but maybe when it comes to certain types of consumer goods, where the purchase is not associated with a situation, it's just a preference, it might be okay. So if you're selling NyQuil, I guess that is associated with a certain situation.
Yeah.
So that's not a good example. I don't know. Maybe there's.
Right. So what are products that are not associated with particular situations?
They all are. That's where I think it makes so much more sense for a trend analysis, right? Like, how do I know what product to produce a bunch of? I'll probably be able to capture that. But when exactly are people going to purchase it? I don't know. I mean, I just did an event that was sponsored by a new alkaline water company that is sort of the counterpart to what's it, Death Water or whatever it's called.
Liquid
Um,
Death.
Liquid
Liquid
Death,
Death.
that's it. And it's
Utah
called
company.
Be Love, and it's like the feminine liquid death. And I think it's a really smart concept because they've said, okay, like
Is that what is that? Liquid menopause, or is that?
liquid, let's be
Rude.
love. No. Another conversation about it with your wife.
Right.
So I'm keeping a tally.
At least two.
They've identified though that people want, people who are not drinking alcohol want a beverage that looks and feels cool in social settings, right?
Sure.
So they took that insight and they said, but what about the people who want to look cool but also don't want to associate with death,
Right.
right? And they've created an alternative for that
Sure.
more effectively hydrate, right? And so like that to me is still, it's taking a trend, analyzing the situational need and applying it to a different audience. So
Absolutely.
do I think that these AI twins are probably going to be really good at that? Yes. They're going to identify underserved markets. But understanding sort of the deep desires of a person and the behavior patterns, that to me is where it gets iffy. But I thought that last quote in the second article was interesting. I can't remember, maybe it was an executive from Coca-Cola who said, if it can actually predict behavior change, then it's no longer a tool, it's strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was really, really interesting. It's another example, I think, of another thing that we've been talking about, which is the promise of AI is superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a superpower given to a company to help the company to accomplish something that the company couldn't do otherwise. So we should expect these kinds of tools to be created from artificial intelligence. There's nothing to stop that. We just have to delineate, okay, what is the purpose of this particular tool? Is it really replacing primary research? One of the things that I like about it, and it's one of the things that I want to explore a little bit, is like after you finish doing primary research with a consumer, what then can you do with that information that you've gathered? Is it just the one presentation, the one output, the one deliverable, or does that become resonant for further modeling, further projecting? I think that there's something really powerful with that, and that's something that we're definitely going to pursue. But then, so there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't think that that means that primary research is going to go away. I think it's going to morph and it's going to change, and there'll actually be more of it because we need to validate what the research simulator is doing. You can't just assume.
There's
One of the
already
things
so
we've
much
learned
bias built into these.
One of the things we've learned
every time
from
there's
AI is that any kind of feedback that you give to it, it then changes things to better try to prove the next time. So does that move you away further and further away from the original intent of the consumer? I think there's going to be lots of things that we have to do to make the simulated world really reflect the real world, if that makes sense.
Yep.
As I look into the future, that's exactly what I'm worried about. Is imagine instead of the questionnaires that they did, imagine it's actually a PLM, a personal language model that actually does, hang around in your Alexa and everything you say and all the choices. It becomes an agent for you that can go out and buy that, and therefore wants to know more about you and know as much about you. And then it starts, the research then focuses on them because it doesn't cost the consumer anything. Hey, we'll pay you to just talk to your PLM. And then it starts changing based on that, which gets into my fundamental issue with AI, which is I am not at the least afraid of the Terminator scenario. What I'm afraid of is the Wall-E scenario.
Mm-hmm.
right? Where the AI takes over and just leads us by the nose, and we no longer even have any agency. We just do whatever it says in their interactions with the consumer goods overlords.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of,
Yes.
I think we have to talk about the fact that CBS so brazenly said 400,000 people opted in to being replicated by an AI twin. I was like, that was some real fine print, CBS.
Right.
There is no way
Right.
400,000 people consciously opted in to that profiling. Did I opt in? Probably. Am I in that 400,000? I assume so. I didn't consciously do that. So I think it was kind of a bold move for them to say, it's cool. Everybody's happy with this. And I think companies really need to be conscientious of how they're collecting that data. And I know they're all doing it. I know we're all opting in unconsciously, but it's pretty brazen to admit it like that.
Yeah. It's interesting. No, more to come, right? The world is changing fast.
It is.
So
It is. And I think we're probably heading toward Wall-E Terminator pretty quickly.
Ooh, a mashup, Wall-E Terminator. I hadn't thought about that.
There you go. Your wife and I will talk about it. All right, guys. Next week, let's come back with another conversation on another piece of recent news that relates to how you're doing experience strategy. Because frankly, none of us can keep up with the pace of change alone.
Right.
So we're here to help you stay up to speed with all of the changes that are happening and help you keep strengthening your point of view so that you're using these tools, not just powerfully, but responsibly. Thanks for listening.
Ta-ta.